And I wanted to start by asking you where you were born and where you grew up.
Okay. My name is Rosa Torres Caskey. I was born and raised in Waco, Texas. Torres is my maiden name. My parents, long history. Torres is a very common name, so and it's a popular name. So. And on my mother's side, it was Monreal. So Monreal Torres Caskey. My family, a lot of them to this day can't pronounce Caskey. They do Cosi, Kasi, Casey. You know, it's just so Rosita is Rosita. That's the way it is. So.
Okay. When did you move to Ohio?
I was very young. My mother comes from a family of 13. My dad comes from a family of 12. And they had 3 children because they wanted a better life. My dad passed away while I was very young. So I took the role of helping my mom. I was the middle child, but I was the leader of our family. My mom was not educated. She did not read or write, and I did in elementary school. So I became her translator. I became her. We had a car when my dad died. We had a car, but no one drove. So my brother, who was about, I don't know, 13, 14, was attempting to drive the car. So we became illegally drivers because he was taking us to the grocery store, and things were close, but when you have to haul that stuff, then you don't want to haul it, so you do it in a car. So I was responsible for my mom for a lot of things, you know, filing Social Security, paying the bills, and learning how to do a checkbook, because my dad left us a checkbook, and, you know, we'll write it right there. And a lot of times we would go to Texas Bell and pay the phone bill. And so a lot of times, you know, we'll ask questions and stuff. And so my mom managed very well. But then I left Texas. I was very young. I married at 17 and met my husband while he was in the military service at Fort Hood. And he thought I was much older than I was, and I thought he was much younger. He was 22 at the time, so, and he was getting out of service. So, you know, he said, I live in Ohio, and I thought, great, where's Ohio? You know, because you can travel days to be in Texas and never leave the state. So, and we had relatives all over, from El Paso to Brownsville to Laredo to across the border, and Dallas and El Murillo, I mean, just all over Texas. And when family reunions got together, it was a big party. Not everybody came, but everyone attempted to come. But I left Texas, and I remember telling my husband that he had to meet my family, we had to meet grandmas, we had to meet, you know, all the siblings. And so he came around, and he got to meet everybody. My grandmother teased him, and you know, she wondered why I was introducing him, and then I had to break the news that I was going to get married and we were going to be leaving. And so, again, they had no concept of where Ohio was, you know, like, oh, we'll see you on the weekends or something like that, you know. So the transaction was made. They got the seal of approval, or he got the seal of approval, and Grandma liked him, and so, you know, she talks about don't leave her stranded across some bridge, you know, and she holds my hand and she says, Mija, you can always come home. You can always come home. If you don't like Ohio, you can always come home. And I said, yeah, I know, Grandma, I know. And she was not known as Grandma. She was known as Mamito. And Mamito has a special place in everybody's heart. And they say I have her spirit, but I still don't see it. But very strong woman. All the women were very strong in our family, on both sides, my dad's and my mother's side. But I came to Ohio, and after a few hours, I thought, okay, we're still in Texas, but, you know, I was anxious to see Ohio. We came the long way around up through Oklahoma and St. Louis and came across because my husband wanted me to see as much of the country as I possibly could. And I fell in love with the Midwest. The mountains, the woods, the landscape, just everything. I mean, when you're in Texas, you can see flat and you can see the sun smoldering up in the air, you know, because it's so hot. But here you see, our trees are short, you know, they're not, they don't get a lot of water and a lot of, you know, they get mostly sun, so they don't grow really tall and just gracious the way the trees do here in Ohio and other places. So I wanted to do more traveling because I really liked what I saw going across the country to come to Ohio. But when we came here, it was, he was from Dayton, so he was anxious to show me Dayton, Ohio, and he, you know, we talked during the trip about the base and some things that were going on and what was happening, and he also said, you know, he wasn't aware of Hispanics in the town where he lived in, and he had explained that he had moved from Dayton to Beaver Creek because of Highway 35 coming through, and so it was more of an affluent area, but he was not aware of brown-skinned people, of Mexicans or Hispanics in his circles. And so, you know, I'm like, okay, not a problem, it's all right. You know, I have my son, I have you, and, you know, we're going to be happily married, happily ever after.
Yeah.
So we come to Dayton, and we looked for an apartment, and we secured the apartment, and so he started going back to work, and I started to go shopping and different places, and the first thing I recognized was that the grocery stores did not have the spices that we were accustomed to using.
Yeah.
So we wind up going, he would take me to places like Lafino's and Woody's, different places that carried more of an international scope of products. So, and so we were able to find whole garlic and whole caminos because I didn't know how to use the measurements of the little bottles of the powder, yeah. So, you know, when it says 3 ajos, you go, okay, how much is 3 ajos in there, you know? Yeah. So those are the kinds of things that I encountered right away with in the cooking. When I left, my grandmother, Mamito, gave me my sartén. My other grandmother gave me my molcajete. And the molcajete is used for the salsa and the chilies. And we grind our garlic and the camino and all of that. I can remember stories of my grandmother with the long comal like this, where she would do the corn and roll the corn and get it smashed to a liquid form, and then make the tortillas. And she cooked on a potbelly stove for as long as I can remember, and that's what she used. We would get up in the morning, we'd put fire in there, and she would have the coffee on the top, and then the sartén, and that's how she would cook them when we would go to her house. And that was a joy to go visit our grandmothers. One was more in the ranching, farm animals and chickens and ducks and all of that. And my other grandmother, you know, was more the homemaker. She taught us, if we got in trouble, we had to go sit on the porch, we read Bible verses, and then we also had to sew. So we either did the tejidos, which was the needlepoint. We had to do something because we were in trouble. So, and the demonio was, we always had the demons, you know, so that was a way of calming ourselves to get rid of the demonios, the demons. But when we got started here in Ohio, I was not used to what I call the city. And to me, Dayton was the city. And the fact that people stared at you a lot because you were a person of color. And again, I was very young, so I did not have these experiences to know. Found a library, and so I started reading. That was part of my weekly routine, was that I stroll my little son over to the library and we go to the library. And I did reading just trying to expand everything that I knew about Ohio and Midwest and different cultures and all this. So we moved to Xenia, we moved to Greene County, and I loved the whole idea because it was Greene County. Something about, it just sounds like it's more of life. So I loved Greene County, and we were married 38 years until he passed, and been active in Greene County and civic affairs, organizational affairs, community affairs, you name it. We came in March 6, 1968. We went to the base, the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, because they advertised Mexican dance, and it was celebrating Independence Day, like in September, and so we went. Of course, we didn't know anybody, but my husband took me, bless his heart, and we sat at a little table, and we talked about, listen to that, everybody's talking in Spanish, and he was, he's Anglo, so he doesn't speak Spanish, and so he's like, I'm picking something up, and I was just so excited. And when you're at the grocery store, you almost accost anybody that's in the line. When you hear someone speaking Spanish, you're going across trying to see who is that, where are they, and just to hear the language. And so that I found was a real void in talking to people and being a part of the community. Where I lived in Waco, Texas, my Aunt Cecilia was a teacher. I had a cousin who was a sheriff in the sheriff's department. One was a highway patrolman. One was a commissioner. Our church, all of my relatives were the teachers in the church, and they were the elders of the church. So to me, that was strong leadership. And when I remember asking my husband, what have they done to all the brown people? Where are the Mexicans? Because I just really believed that Mexicans were all over, all over the United States. We had relatives in California, we had relatives in Chicago, we had relatives in New York. So where were they in Ohio? What have they done to my people? Because I know they're here. They're just not visible. And what I learned is that we are an invisible culture. We try to assimilate, and my husband he tried very hard to get me to assimilate. He used to have long hair when I came here, long hair, and he would say, don't wear those flowers because people are going to know you're different. Don't speak Spanish, to my son, because people are going to notice that. And so, I'm saying, well, okay, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to be a dutiful wife at the same time. So I'm trying to listen to him and do all of this, and thinking, okay, the men always try to pick you up, because you're different, I guess. I don't know. And so that was offensive to me, because you were very respectful of where I come from, and you just didn't do that to women or to girls, especially a woman with a child. I was probably young, but I was a woman with a child, so at least I felt old. But over the course of the years, as I had 2 children, and again, we did not. I had this stuff in boxes. I had it in my closet. I had some of it on my walls. And when I was missing my culture or missing my family, I got a ticket to go home. So I got to travel home quite frequently. About 6-7 times a year I would go home. Now I go less frequently, but they come up. So we still have that connection. But when you're newlyweds or you're young marrieds, you don't have the extra money to do a lot of things. But he put it on a charge card, because once I started crying, there was no stopping about missing my family, or missing the void that was missing in what I was doing. We had women, my cousins, my aunts, my everybody, that would go in the kitchen, and we all cooked together. It was a communal thing. And the noise, the laughter, the conversations, and I think this is true of all Latino families. You can have 10 different conversations going, and you still hear it, and you're like, no, that's not true. And it's like, and so, but you have this, I don't know, it's just so much fun and this liveliness that happens. But in that, that's one of the things that I missed was that, and he came from a small family, and there were no extended family for him. So I just missed that. And,
Oh.
right.
You mentioned some of the things that you had in boxes. You just quickly mentioned how when you came, you had something in boxes, and you hung up some things when you moved here to Ohio. So I wanted to ask you along those lines, what are some of the traditions that you try to keep, or that you tried to keep with your kids as they were growing up, and for yourself too?
Well, I'm real proud of them because they, we made flour tortillas on a regular basis. I didn't know you could buy them at the store. And so, when we had, and we had rice and beans at least 2-3 times a week. I have beans in the refrigerator, but I'm making a big pot of beans. And the kids would say, Mom, we already have beans. And I say, you always have a pot of beans. My grandma, my mom, you always have a pot of beans, and we put them in the freezer. So now when they come over and they're like, Mom's got beans in the freezer, and then, when they don't, they're like, what kind of Mexican are you? You don't have beans in the freezer. But yeah, we learned, they were taught to make tortillas very early on when they were little, with the little rolling pin, the little ones like this, and they put them on the sartén and cook their little tortillas, and they've learned to make tortillas, and my grandchildren have learned to make tortillas, which is a tradition thing. We taught them how to make tamales. They love to eat them. They don't like to make them because of the process. But when my mom comes, my sister comes, or somebody comes, we usually make tamales in the kitchen so that they can come and participate in that. The salsa and the chile. Again, I didn't know you could get this at the store. Frank's hot sauce and the picante and the El Paso salsa and all those. Because we made our own from scratch. We always had tomatoes. You had chilies that we grew in our own gardens, and so you made chili. And so we would, my husband learned to make salsa just as good as I did, and so did my son, and so did my daughter. And to this day, I don't have to cook because somebody does the tortillas, somebody does the fajitas, somebody does the rice, somebody does the beans, and Mama just comes sit down. So Mama comes and sits down, and my son makes cheater enchiladas now, which he gets the can of salsa to pour over the enchiladas, but I don't care.
Cheater.
I don't care. I said, these are pretty good, and he said, they came. I got the sauce out of the can. I went, and I said, okay, we've just now named these cheater enchiladas. Chris is famous for his cheater enchiladas, but they, they've been eating aguacates and since they were born. Salsa since they were born. They just get used to it and roll it up. I mean, hot tortillas with butter and roll them up and eat them and run out the door. The best. So the cooking, I'd say, was what they learned. The sewing, not so much. I think I had problems with that because I knew that was part of a castigo. It was part of a punishment. So, I didn't stress that as much. But the cooking, they got it,
Now, I assume that you were mainly a stay-at-home mom when your kids were young?
When my kids were young, yes. Once they got into school, then again, because I had spent a lot of time in libraries and community events and what was going on, I was very active. Coming from Texas, where my family was very active in everything, and then to come and then, we're not a part of the community. And so I made it an effort to become a part of the community. We had looked around to find a Catholic church because I personally am not Catholic, although I was baptized Catholic, but I was raised Presbyterian. And so my husband says, well, maybe there's a Catholic church. You could listen to the Mass. And I said, I could do Mass because, my mom would let us do anything if it was church related. So my cousins, we already had a plan that we could go anywhere. if it was church related. So we always, got dolled up and we were doing stuff with the church because it was church related. And Moms always let us go, so we went out to go see if we could meet the cute guys and see who was wearing what. So we looked, and at the time, Dayton was having Spanish Mass once a month. And we waited for that time. When we went to the Mass, my husband didn't go, but I went to the Mass, and there was less than 5 people there, including the priest and the people that helped. So there was probably 3 people in the audience, including myself. And of course, everybody was very quiet, and no one spoke. But it was a connection for me. So I still went, and I'd mark it on my little calendar, which ones were highlighted, so that I would make an effort to go to Catholic Mass. And then all the time I was still going to Presbyterian Church on Sunday afternoon, because Mass was like at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I got off church there, and then I'd go to Mass and listen to Mass. And again, it was about the language, listening to the language. And now they have 2 Masses going on, and they have Catholic Church every Sunday. Every Sunday and Saturday, so.
Great.
Yeah.
What jobs have you had here?
I've been very blessed. My husband told me that I would never find a job because I was too young. And I probably wouldn't get hired, okay, because of the color of my skin. So I thought, well, okay. My first job was at J.C. Penney's as a clerk. And I had strong ties because I had gotten a scholarship when I was young. And so I worked in a library at El Centro College in Dallas. And so that's how the library thing all came out at the time. But I guess I interned as a library aide in El Centro in Dallas at 15. So even then I was in the library. But I started working at J.C. Penney's as a sales clerk, and then after that took some more time off. And then I started working at the schools. I was volunteering in the library at the schools, and started, they said, well, you need to apply for this job, and so I applied, and they hired me, and I was a library aide for the schools with my kids in school, and that was good. And then as my husband got ill, he would get laid off, and times were bad, whatever. My daughter at the time was going into Girl Scouts or Brownies and whatever that was. And my husband says, why do you want her to do that? I says, I remember those little girls, and we never got to be in it because Mom wouldn't let us go. But I said, I want to do that. So I became a troop leader in scouting. And so then someone in the field executive office said, you are so good at what you do. You need to apply at the Girl Scout office. So I went from the school system in the library to the Girl Scout office. And I worked for the Girl Scout office in the reception office. They quickly moved me to the shop where they sold the badges and all this stuff. My organizational skills, I had all these little cubbies and everything marked.
I feel freshened up.
So after that, my husband got even sicker. He had heart disease and kidney failure and liver problems, and he wanted me to come closer to home because by the time I left Girl Scouting, I was one of the first Latino field executives in the area, and I had a pretty great region. I was a master trainer. Education was always a part of what I liked to do. So they sent me, I went to New York, and I'd go do trainings in different areas of the country because they sent diversity teams. So I was part of that diversity, being a Latina. So after that, I went to work. My husband called me one day, and I was happy in my job, and he called me one day, and of course he's always wanted me to come closer to home. So he had called me and he says, I think your job just was listed in the paper. And I said, what do you mean? He said, they need a volunteer coordinator at the museum in Wilberforce. I said, oh, that's like 5 minutes away from my house. I said, well, I'll put an application in. And I put in my application. I went to Texas. I came back, and I had messages and a letter saying they'd like to see me for an interview. So I worked for the National Afro-American Museum and Cultural Center for 18 years after that. So I've been blessed. I've had some really good jobs. And when they closed, I went back to get my license and teaching degree, and I'm an elementary school teacher now.
Are you teaching right now?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great.
Yes.
How many years have you
Well, I've been teaching about 3 years. I considered myself teaching at the museum because we taught for the proficiency test for 3rd graders and 5th graders. And so when they came to do the social studies content of what they needed, I would ask teachers, what do they need to cover? What do they need to cover? Because I try to do living history so that the kids could actually see a reenactment of the Underground Railroad, or they would see videos on the Industrial Revolution, what happened in this country, the migration. You know, we would have people walking through the museum saying, I'm going to Michigan, and it's because the migration of transportation, of Industrial Revolution, as people were moving and migrating to get new jobs. So that's what I did at the museum. So I felt like I was a teacher and went back to teaching.
Wow, great. That's amazing. What have been some of the hardest or most difficult times of living here?
Probably the social injustice. Again, I was very active in church affairs, and the church is always trying to reach out to the communities. And when families have real problems, the church cannot always intervene. And that, to me, that was very frustrating, because sometimes you'd go and you'd tell these stories, and the church would say, well, our hands are tied, we can only do this, or we can only do that, and lo siento, but, nothing. My relationship with the Hispanic population was very limited because everyone was dispersed in different areas, and we didn't have, if you went to a club or you went to a party that was specific for either the September 15th celebration, for the Independence Day, or for George Washington's birthday, which we used to celebrate a lot in Texas, and, just different things like that, The church was very instrumental, but they didn't do enough. So the social justice for me was key. We traveled a lot through Ohio, going to Michigan and stuff for different church affairs, and I remember seeing migrant workers working out in the fields. I literally made my husband stop so that I could watch or maybe even talk to somebody. And then that just hit me that I needed to maybe participate with some of the migrant workers. I got involved with Flock at the time, which was up around Cleveland, Lorain area, Toledo area. And our church was Kentucky, Ohio, and Michigan. And our synod office was in Toledo. And they were very familiar with Flock. So I gravitated to Toledo a lot, working with a lot of those issues. If they had celebrations, I got invited. We went clear to Toledo. We got great tamales. We got great food. And we were treated very well. I found that my translation skills, my family would laugh at my Spanish because I'd go home and they were like, that's not how you say it. I'm like, oh, well, I'm losing it. So, but what I found interesting was that they wanted me as a translator in Toledo because I at least spoke enough to get by. But the social injustice, and so one of the things that, when families were getting kicked out of their apartments, or they would lose their jobs because they got hurt on the job, and then the church is telling me that their hands are tied, and I had a long-time affiliation with LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. My family was a part of that. I still have relatives that are part of that. And I would call my Aunt Matilda, this is what they're doing. You believe this? And so we would have civil rights discussions. And so they kept, I didn't realize it, but at the time they were pushing me to, you need to do something about it, that's not right. And so, and then recognizing that the church was limited in what they were doing. So we started the LULAC organization in Ohio. And from that, I mean, it's grown. And we took on a couple of immigration issues. We took on a couple of, we did translations for a lot of organizations and businesses at the time, and hospitals. And the Hispanic population just started growing. And I did a lot of work with migrant workers, but then you had the other side as well. You had professionals and middle-class families that were also struggling and dealing with some issues. And some people that, you know, they say they're Latinos or they're Mexican, but they don't want to admit it because, you know, then they don't want to be categorized as the Mexican who causes or creates some of their own situations, and they just don't want to be a part of that, I guess, or, you know, they don't want people to make the connection.
Okay. Let's see. Look at my notes here. What does Ohio mean to you?
Ohio, actually, I've grown fond of Ohio. I have learned to love Ohio. Like I said, Greene County to me was the best county ever. And I've made some inroads in Greene County and Ohio, I feel. But I love Ohio because it's still open to some changes if they need to be made. I still think that it's a state that tries to do what's good for their people, for Ohio. Coming from the 1960s, I've seen a lot of changes happen in Ohio. I remember the black unrest that was going on. I remember reading a lot of that in the paper, and just thinking, oh, it's the city, it's the city. But it wasn't the city. And over the years, I think Ohio has adapted to some of the changes, and in fact embracing some of the changes. We have neighbors like Indiana and Michigan that also have had a lot of Latino populations, and so I think Ohio has been ahead of its time in some of those things. Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland. I mean, Lorraine's population of Latinos in that area, probably as far back as anyone can remember. But I see Ohio as growing and having more growth and opportunities for Latinos. The Latinos are here. Bilingual people are needed regardless of color of skin. Which is funny because I can remember in Texas, I thought everybody spoke Spanish. White, black, brown, everybody spoke Spanish. So to come to Ohio, you know, and you see a black person, or you see a white person, you try to talk to them in Spanish. And they're looking at you like, oh, I don't know what you're saying. But, you know, that was my naiveness at the time because, you know, and I told my husband, I said, I can't believe I was trying to talk to this black family and they wouldn't talk back to me. They just kept back telling me like they didn't understand. He said, they probably don't. But I thought everybody spoke Spanish.
What do you think, since you've been here for many decades, what has been the biggest change that you've noticed in terms of the conditions of Latinos or Latino life or life in general?
I think the women have exploded. I think the women are being empowered. I think they can handle the kitchen, but they can also handle the business world and professionalism. And when I was growing up, it was like, don't rock the boat. And my husband was very supportive, but I think I glow. I'm so proud of watching the Latino women just evolve and take charge.
Well, you mentioned a lot of women have been active in activism, right?
Yes.
And that has continued to be so
I think
nowadays.
So.
So that it's great to have that background as well. If you were to offer advice to immigrants to Ohio, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to learn English. Not because I want them to lose their Spanish. I want them to keep and maintain their Spanish, but it's a way of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Same way that I would tell Anglo-Americans, learn Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Because to be bilingual in any language,
Mm-hmm.
learn 2 languages, learn 3, learn 4, because you're going to be marketable, you're going to be globally ready for anything that happens. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to learn a language. I think we do our children, our families a disservice if we say, well, all I want to do is speak Spanish. You're keeping yourself at a plateau instead of growing a little bit more by learning some English. Because then you're dependent on your children. Then you're dependent on others to translate for you, or to go to the store, or to read the insurance papers for you.
Which you had to do.
Right, right. We're going to be doing a presentation on healthcare, and we're going to translate. But we're going to translate and explain what the healthcare system is about, and then give them opportunities if they want to sign up or not, and that's their choice.
Well, you brought a lot of artifacts for us, and you mentioned that there's a story behind them. So I would like to just choose a couple and let us know what that story is.
Can we go? Ready?
Okay.
Yeah, so go ahead and tell us.
This is probably my prized possession because it's still the molcajete for my salsas and stuff. So that's one of the things that was given to me when I left. So I've treasured that one. And also the pitcher of water, which I got from one of my other grandmothers. And then the big one broke, so I still keep the cup, and that stays on my shelf. I had a lot of masks and plates and stuff in my living room and around the house. But this one, I did a Mexico mission trip. We did like a Habitat for Humanity. And so this one was at Piedras Negras. And we did Habitat over there. And that's where my grandfather was born. And it was funny because I didn't even know that when we signed up for the Mexico mission trip for their church. And so I brought back this plate from Mexico because I wanted to share that. And I wanted to have that history that, Piedras Negras and Eagle Pass, they would walk across the border to work in Texas and then go back, and then he met my grandmother, and then they got married, and then, it's one of those things. And back then you could do that all the time, and now we wait to cross over and then we come back. But this little cup, and everybody wants this little cup. This little cup was my sister's, given to her from her godparents when she was baptized. And so we had a whole set of dishes, and she and I would sit outside by the swing set, and we would have, I guess, tea, but we would play dishes, and we would do all the stuff. And this is the only survivor cup that's left. My sister has one, and I have one, and
it's made out of
it's a tin.
Yeah.
It's a tin. It's a little tin. And when I went back to Texas, so years after, and my mom was moving from that area, she had said, because I said my grandmother passed away, and I said, well, I want to take some things back with me so I can add to my collection. And then I said, where's that little cup? And she said, well, Yolanda has one. She said, but I think I have another one. It's in the sugar bowl. And so I thought that was funny that it was in the sugar bowl.
It was used to.
Yeah, it's a scoop. It's a scoop. So we washed it out, and I came back, and I was sharing it with my husband, and he says, and my family, and they said, well, what are you going to do with it? I said, well, Mom had it as a sugar scoop, so I think I'm going to keep it in the sugar, and we'll just use it as a sugar scoop. So we measured it to make sure how much we have in there. So we use it as it's a sugar scoop. So and my granddaughters now will say, that's got a little hole in it, Grandma, but don't throw it away, because I have three older ones, and they're fussing over the little
who gets to keep
who
it.
gets the cup. Yeah, because I tell her, my sister and I we played dolls, and the dolls got a drink and all of this. So the little scoopy cup was one of my favorites. And then going back every year, my grandma used to make tejidos for me, and And this is one they gave me for when I got married. And it would go, she said, it's a kitten. And she says, put this on your window, and that way you can let the sunlight in all the time. So, and they've all passed. They've all passed. All my grandmothers have passed, and I have one aunt who's in her 90s, and she just had her 90th birthday in December, and she still call her, talk to her. She says, I'm still living. She's all right. She's fun. She's fun. Want to share our stories. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this
You're welcome.
interview. It's been a pleasure listening to you. And thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome. I think anytime we have an opportunity to share stories, that's a way of keeping our history alive.